Hello, how are you? Welcome to the Talknologies, a short talk with invitees that will help us to better understand how technology can change for the better even the most traditional activities and the oldest ones. So today we have with us from Mozambique in Africa two invitees. They are both co-founders of the Fletcher Howell Consulting. They have an extensive experience as educators in Mozambique, a very challenging environment. So today we have with us Colleen Fletcher and also Jasmine Howell. So the first question that I have to both of you, and I would start by Colleen, is what role can technology play in empowering rural Mozambique communities, specifically one of the pillars of the Mozambican society, which are women.
Okay, thank you so much for the invite. Yes, thank you so much. And I think that Jasmine and I will probably answer, sort of both supply answers as well. But as we know, the context of Mozambique, or for those of you who don't know the context of Mozambique, is that it is a patriarchal society. However, women play a very, very strong role within that society. They remain the primary caregivers in Mozambique, and in the rural areas, which still actually constitutes the majority of the space and the population, within the rural areas or peri-urban areas, women are still practicing subsistence farming, and they are also the primary caregivers in their families. So when we look at empowerment of women, we have to actually contextualize and say, well, what does that mean in this context? If they are primary primary caregivers, or if they are subsistence farmers, empowerment through that occupation, through those activities, would be meaningful to them. And so that's the starting point, is really just looking at the context and saying, right, women do these tasks, how and to what extent can that even be leveraged even more? So that is what empowerment would be. But Jasmine, I'm sure would like to add some more to that.
Well, I would just say, speaking more to the point of empowerment, because this really does play a crucial role in technology in Mozambique. Obviously, when we're looking at empowerment, we can say that it's looking at the process of becoming stronger and more confident, and controlling one's life and claiming one's rights. But in our experience and in our work, this process really comes to fruition when the women have the knowledge, excuse me, and the resources that they need. You can't have one without the other. If I asked you today to please make some shima for me on this call, you would probably say, I'm sorry, I can't. Shima is a staple food in Mozambique. It's made from maize. It's not in your context, perhaps, that you know how to make shima. You don't have the knowledge and you don't have the ingredients in front of you to make it. So it's really that point of empowerment coming from having both the knowledge and the resources, and you can't have one without the other. So empowerment is empowerment, but it's as Colleen mentioned, it looks different based on the context that you're in, and it's those power differentials and the political realities, the lived experiences, the religion, the language, all of these things that make up meaning for a person. So we really need to look at what that context is for these women, and when we're thinking of ways to foster empowerment, when we're collaborating with them, whether it's in education, where sharing knowledge and resources, or it's technology, that's really needing to be the starting place, so that it can be a successful outcome. Because if you don't have that contextualized, relevant, authentic starting place, then you're not going to have a successful outcome.
because sometimes technology can have the opposite effect of what is intended to have. Because when we talk about people that are not initiated yet on how to deal with technologies, they can backfire and have the opposite intent. So, how does technology fit into the lives of rural women? What systems, what tools already exist in their specific context?
So the wonderful thing is that it doesn't matter where you go to in rural Mozambique, somebody's got a smartphone. And so we have a smartphone and we have good signal, pretty good signal throughout the country. Certainly good enough to run a smartphone and have a WhatsApp group. WhatsApp groups are utilized, but it doesn't matter where the women are actually located. So these very simple fundamental tools that we take for granted in other countries have become a lifeline and have become a tool for empowerment for women. Because with a smartphone, you can also do your online banking. There's a program here called M-Pesa where you do your online transactions and what have you. And as recent as about 5 years ago, the laws changed in Mozambique where women could actually open their own bank account without having to have the permission from a husband or a father. So that was the first step. They were able to open a bank account. Now, to control that bank account, they actually have a smartphone where they can control and have full power of how their money is utilized within that smartphone. And so, like I said, this tool, which also they utilize WhatsApps and form groups and community groups, and we'll elaborate a little bit on that further, is that in this context of rural Mozambique, this one tool has been liberating and has been empowering for women. So yes, it is. It could be restrictive if we're thinking technology in terms of having an iPad or a device. But when you think of as simple as a smartphone that can have a WhatsApp group where you can record a voice note, so you don't even have to be literate. You can read. You don't have to read and write. You can actually just learn how to do a voice note. That becomes liberating because suddenly you have access to other people, access to knowledge, access to learning.
What's your view on this, Jasmine?
I mean, coming from, I grew up in North America in Canada, and moved to Mozambique about 5 years ago. And you know, the kind of global North perspective and preconceived ideas and teachings that we get here kind of paint a certain picture of Africa. And so I myself had certain biases coming in to my experience in Mozambique. And I have to say that I've just been amazed and in awe of how the country has used technology. I mean, the M-Pesa system alone is something that I had never heard of before. WhatsApp I had never heard of before. But the way in which they utilize it and gain empowerment through technology has been really eye-opening for myself.
I believe that there may be some challenges in developing and implementing technology in rural Mozambique. Sometimes we recall the Maslow pyramids, where we have the basic needs at the bottom. Now it has been updated with battery life and Wi-Fi. So I believe that sometimes even the very existence of available electricity may be a problem. Is that so, Colleen?
Yes, that absolutely is so. But I think that in this world that we live in that has been turned upside down in so many ways already, in some instances, these rural communities are one tiny little step ahead in that they have been utilizing solar. There are actually programs out here where they have the tiniest little solar panels that can generate enough electricity for you to be able to charge your phone. And let me tell you, it is the priority. When any of the communities here invest in a solar panel, the first thing they're charging is their phone. Um, and so it remains a challenge. Electricity is actually spreading through the country. Obviously, there are some very, very remote areas where that is a challenge, and solar seems it is starting to fulfill that need, that gap. So that remains a big challenge. But I think again, as Jasmine said, you know, we're coming to this with a global North perspective. of surely if they haven't got electricity, then it can't work. When in fact, we're coming into an environment that is going to make it work when they see the advantages that this tool can supply them. They will make it work. They're incredibly entrepreneurial and incredibly innovative. And within no time, you see little solar panels being sold because somebody's, turned that into a new source of income. And we're a bit blindsided by our global north perspective as to what the challenges might be.
And I will just attest to that as well. As I said before, coming from the global north, and it's really about looking internally as well, and seeing what those preconceived ideas and biases that you have, and then getting into the community and saying, well, no, let's challenge this because a lot of them are not true. And then, of course, I think there's some more obvious challenges when you're developing technology ideas. Of course, we can speak about literacy, and the literacy rates in Mozambique are still low. It really depends on the communities that you're working with across the country. It kind of hovers at 50%, but it really varies in each community. It could be up to 80, or there could be a really strong percentage of the group that has had primary education, so they're very literate. Of course, access to technology, as Colleen has mentioned, smartphones are very common, but not everybody has accessibility to a computer or a tablet. And then I think another large barrier is of course language. I mean, Mozambique's official language is Portuguese, but there's a ton of indigenous languages that are not represented in technology, and a lot of them are not traditionally written languages as well. So that's something that we need to keep in mind and think, okay, well, how can we reach these individuals, and how can we maybe use visual cues or other areas to reach these individuals? But with all those challenges being said, as we've said, we see these incredible people using technology, and specifically the ICT technology types. And we feel like there's a lot of opportunity to further technology and use it in Mozambique.
The other side of the coin is on one side we have challenges, on the other we have opportunities. And in the Western world, we are pretty much used to neglect some of the benefits of technology because we take it for granted. Am I wrong if I say that in a country like Mozambique, people squeeze the most out of the technologies they have at hand? What are the opportunities for developing and implementing technology in Mozambique rural areas?
Mm-hmm. And this is the exciting part, and it's exactly what you say. I think that device that they have access to, a smartphone, for example, is used so extensively because it is what they have and it's what they have access to. So I think if we look at the opportunities, and there's enormous opportunities not only in rural Mozambique, but I think by default we talk about sub-Saharan Africa, that we've got to look at what Jasmine and I always refer to as our 3 C's. So when you're going to leverage, what is there already? Let's leverage context, culture, and communities, those 3 things. So if you leverage the context and the opportunities that arise out of that, leveraging the context for rural women, while it is a patriarchal society, it is a strong women's associations that run communities. They are the primary caregivers. They are the subsistence farmers. So there's 2 areas that are very focused on, and that is how can they look after their children and how can they feed their children. One thing, for example, that Jasmine and I were astounded by is these are subsistence farmers. They rely on the crops that they still produce with old technology, old systems. They still hoe the grounds, but not one community that we've spoken to has actually been educated in terms of climate change. I mean, how simple could it be if there was an app on a cell phone that could use visual and audio cues to advise and to educate these women who rely on their crops about climate change? They can tell you how climate has changed in their lifetime. But I mean, it's an untapped untapped sourcing. Come on, there's all these women that rely on that. The second one is healthcare. They are the primary caregivers. So they are concerned about the health of their families. Just in this time with COVID, we have been really refreshed as well as astounded at how thirsty they are for this knowledge about COVID. Not the campaigns that we assume are working, which is television campaigns and what have you, which many of them have access to as well. But really knuckling down and saying, well, how can I protect my family? What is the purpose of a mask? Again, with WhatsApp groups, they are giving each other support. We have seen that. Working with a group of women. Once we did a project, we did some training on COVID prevention and hand wash and primary healthcare. And long after the project had finished, these WhatsApp groups had been formed. So these women had formed a community of learners amongst themselves. And we're still on it. And they give each other WhatsApp notes because they're all speaking in Shangana or Ronga, and they are supporting each other. So if we look at the context of them being primary healthcare and subsistence farmers, we need to leverage that for technology. The second thing is culture. Indigenous knowledge systems. There is ample opportunity to leverage that. Again, we have found that with COVID, how many times have the women come to us and given us herbal remedies, that their grandparents have actually used for congestion and for coughs and what have you? How beautiful would this be if that knowledge that is there can be shared not only amongst themselves, but share it to the global north, and that culture, I think, should be leveraged through technology. And again, something simple. Keep it simple. Keep it to a cell phone because that's what they can access and that's what they can charge. And then finally, community. We know with the situation that the world is in right now, communities have, on the one hand, broken down because you can't see people, and on the other hand, they've come together in support of each other. And so what Jasmine and I have found working with these groups of women is that they have then gone and formed these learning communities with each other through WhatsApp groups, through their cell phones, that they're giving each other support. So, if we look at context, culture, and community, these are three things that could very readily and easily be leveraged through technology and just be explored and make a positive impact on the women and their families.
What about you, Jasmine? What is your say about the not the challenges that we already talked about, but the opportunities that are ahead of us?
Yeah, I think Colleen has really hit it on the nose. I think more than anything, her last piece there, speaking about community, and really using technology not as a barrier, as we've spoke about, but to strengthen community connection and community ties. And looking ahead to developing technology, it can really promote inclusive development. But I think that development needs to always come from a place of a human-centered design, first and foremost.
Well, thank you so much, Colleen and Jasmine, for bringing us so stark examples of how technology can change life of the people for the better. And we wish you all the best for the work that you are doing in Mozambique.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much, and
much.
thanks for the opportunity.